For as long as I can remember, I have loved going to the movies. There is something so captivating and transformative about film. How a gifted screenwriter can turn incredible ideas into powerful words, summoning drama, humor, and conflict from the page like casting a spell. How an actor who knows their part better than they know themselves can breathe life into those words, creating a character who until that moment only existed on paper, and a performance with the potential to be remembered for generations to come. And how a director with vision and imagination can bind those rare elemental creative forces, fashioning them into a gateway able to draw you into whole other worlds, holding fast to your senses until the closing credits roll, and sometimes, if the job is well done, for far longer. My name is M. Glenn Gore. I'll be your host each week as we explore in depth the newest releases both in the theater and at home. You're watching In Like Glenn, and today we're discussing Deadpool 2. The following review contains spoilers for the film Deadpool 2. Proceed with caution. As comic book history goes, Deadpool debuted in 1991, a creation of longtime writer-editor Fabian Nicieza and Image Comics co-founder and artist Rob Liefeld. Little more than a run-of-the-mill hired gun in his New Mutants number 98 inaugural appearance, it wasn't until Man of Action Studios' Joe Kelly and Conan the Barbarian and Black Panther writer-editor Christopher Priest got their hands on the character some 6 years later that he was truly born, evolving into the metatextual mutant mercenary fans today know best. Mentally unbalanced yet frequently funny, morally ambiguous, and prone to breaking the fourth wall at a moment's notice, this version of the infamous Merc with a Mouth made his way to the screen in a modestly budgeted, for an action film, self-titled 2016 feature, proving that an absurdist and self-referential, foul-mouthed R-rated comic book property could not only work, but shatter box office records and go on to spawn a wildly anticipated sequel in the process.
Most impressive.
Deadpool 2 sees the roguish Ryan Reynolds back in the title role. Emboldened by the unmitigated success of the franchise's previous entry, this follow-up comes out of the gate swinging hard with a vicious combo of dazzling leads, ambitious action set pieces, and enough wanton reckless abandon to bring the entire project to the brink of annihilation.
Love your work.
I'm referring in part to the unscheduled departure of director Tim Miller over widely reported creative differences with Reynolds regarding the path this one might take. And while Deadpool 2 is similar to its well-received predecessor in almost every respect, that is less a compliment and more an indictment. I will always wonder what Miller's version would have been like because this one suffers simply by hewing too closely to its precursor, taking a safe road paved with a well-tread blacktop of jokes told once already before, while trading soul for size and shrewdness for shock value. Now before we get too far, I know what you're saying to yourself. You liked the first one, you just said so. If this one is exactly the same, how could I not have enjoyed it? Well, we'll get to that. The premise, which is oddly pedestrian for a character as outlandish as Deadpool, involves a desperate attempt to save a young mutant abuse survivor from a violent end at the hands of time-traveling, cybernetically enhanced super soldier and 90s-era X-Men fan favorite Cable, brought to gruff, unapologetic life here by No Country for Old Men's incredibly talented and much sought-after Josh Brolin.
So what does that make me, your buddy?
Cable has a twisty but storied history where the comics are concerned, which has thankfully been all but jettisoned for the purposes of this movie. His tale here is a cliche, a rote needs of the many outweighing the needs of the few storyline. He has come to the past to assassinate the child known as Fire Fist before he can grow into a powerful mutant who will eventually prove responsible for the deaths of hundreds in the near war-torn future, including Cable's own wife and daughter.
I just want my kids back.
This will not be the only time innocent women are butchered in this movie as a plot device for spurring men into action, but more on that in a moment. Like Cable, Fire Fist is another Marvel Comics alumnus. Originally appearing in the pages of X-Factor #1, both the comic version and his silver screen counterpart possess immense pyrokinetic abilities, but that's about where the similarities end.
Same, but different.
Fire Fist is played by Hunt for the Wilder People's Julian Dennison, and while I wish I could praise his performance, I mostly found it lopsided. The child suffers both physical and emotional torment at a sinister mutant re-education center disguised as the orphanage where he is housed. This is, of course, designed to elicit sympathy for the boy and, at the very least, an understanding of why he is fated to turn to violence and destruction. But after enough time, it becomes a challenge not to simply find him annoying, which undermines much of the necessary goodwill required to empathize with him. In order to later free the child from a heavily fortified mutant incarceration facility and stave off Cable's righteous wrath, Deadpool puts together his own team of mutant anti-heroes, an X-Force if you will, which features such famous comics faces as Domino and Shatterstar. But before you get too excited about that, none of them save for the former gets to actually be in the movie. Let me first say that Zazie Beetz of the acclaimed FX series Atlanta does a fantastic job as Domino, whose mutant ability is that she is impossibly lucky. Beetz is a joy to behold. She has stage presence, charisma, attitude to spare, and no shortage of solid lines. I'm particularly fond of how the actress explains the signature diamond-shaped mark over her left eye, a result of vitiligo. I only wish they'd gone further with it, spreading the patches across her arms as well, as those afflicted with a rare skin condition almost never get to see themselves represented on screen, especially in a character this cool. Domino doesn't have an arc, regrettably, but she is hardly the only victim of that. Unlike its forerunner, Deadpool 2's cup overflows with known and beloved characters from the comics, yet gives precious few of them anything of weight or substance to do, beyond appearing long enough for you to say, "Look!"
It's that one guy.
This is played for laughs in a few instances, most notably a blink-and-you'll-miss-it cameo appearance by the cast of, I guess, X-Men Apocalypse. Who can tell what with that convoluted cul-de-sac of a timeline those films operate from?
These timelines are so confusing.
Reynolds is, of course, as at home in the role as ever, and has, much like Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine before him, firmly cemented himself as the only actor we want to see in this part. It's his, and he owns it completely. This movie is effectively Terminator 2, if Terminator 2 had been an irreverent tongue-in-cheek comedy with its sights set on lampshading the many tropes and conventions of the time travel action genre. After all, it's a yarn about a nigh unstoppable killing machine, or mostly machine, sent from the future to eliminate a boy burdened with destiny, that must be protected by a soldier who may not be up to the task. And while Terminator's sequel concerns itself with themes of fatherhood, humanity, and fate versus choice between all of the shotgun, motorcycle, and liquid metal hijinks, Deadpool 2 attempts but doesn't always succeed in tackling some of the same ideas. Cable may have come to the past to save his wife and daughter from certain death, but is he a hero for doing so when, in his eyes, the only way to achieve that end is by murdering a child? There's also something to be said about the vast swaths of people he kills just to get to the boy, which further thrusts his mission into moral ambiguity, but the film has nothing at all to say on that subject. In the beginning, the comics presented Cable as fairly one-note, existing for some time as basically a collection of mid-90s fads. A humorless and unnaturally humongous Y chromosome, draped in guns and pouches, all glowing eyes and metal arms signifying, at least at first, little beyond the cosmetic. But Brolin makes the character believable, more, and imbues the dour murder machine with much-needed humanity and even a welcome vulnerability. Brianna Hildebrand reprises her role as the awesome Negasonic teenage warhead, whom I lament is given next to nothing to do this time around. This is made even more disappointing as the film gives her a girlfriend in the form of Shiori Katsuna's mutant Yukio, who is equally underutilized. Colossus is back, of course, and still adamant about convincing Deadpool to join the X-Men, and while his part in the proceedings is larger than most, outside of an eagerly anticipated but sorely underwhelming brawl during the climax, there isn't much to really say about him. Leslie Ogam's Blind Al returns briefly, as does TJ Miller's bartender Weasel, whose reduced screen time in lieu of recent physical abuse allegations leveled against him remains too great still for my taste. Karan Soni is also back as Dopinder, Deadpool's mild-mannered friend and cabbie. He's just as charming and entertaining as he was the last time we saw him, and even has a small arc involving his desire to join X-Force, despite not actually having superpowers. But he also falls prey to too little time on screen to really sell the thread. This kind of thing seriously goes on throughout the entire film. A genuinely funny recruiting scene wherein Deadpool assembles the diverse and ludicrous members of X-Force leads to an equally amusing scene in which they're all summarily slaughtered. But funny as it is, one can't help but feel somewhat slighted, especially at the unceremonious death of Shatterstar, whom, while always ridiculous, at least did the one thing the entirety of the X-Men film franchise has failed to do thus far, and that is embrace the inherent lunacy of its source material.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
Yes, motherfucker, I would. The same can be said of Black Tom Cassidy, who shows up in the Icebox, the mutant prison facility where Fire Fist is incarcerated. A third-tier comic character at best, it was still legitimately exciting to see him on screen. Immediately recalling how Kevin Bacon shined as Sebastian Shaw, another less than memorable villain from the comics, in X-Men First Class, it was my hope Cassidy would serve in much the same capacity here, yet he too is taken out of play almost as an afterthought, before he even has a chance to do anything. That these characters keep showing up only to die shortly thereafter, or appear just long enough to do one small, near inconsequential thing that is all but forgotten moments later, is harmful to the film as a whole. I will admit to being pleasantly surprised by the unexpected appearance of Juggernaut, who not only plays a large part in the film, but is also handled with far greater success in this outing than when we saw him in the abhorrent X-Men The Last Stand. Like Colossus, he is now wholly CGI, and no longer restrained by the limitations of a man in a helmet, even if that man was this lovable lug.
I'm the Juggernaut, bitch!
The filmmakers are finally free to embrace the character's sheer size and the full scope of his abilities, even if the effects used to bring him to life fluctuate between serviceable and subpar. The movie still erroneously believed Juggernaut to be a mutant, however, because I guess nobody wants to deal with magic crystals, and frankly, who can blame them, so I'll take what I can get in this instance and call it a win. And while we're on the topic of the CGI, it's not great. Why is it so hard to make fire look good? Deadpool 2's budget is nearly twice what the first film's was, yet the effects never really stun, never impress, which is a shame given the more ambitious set pieces that play out. One of the film's standout scenes, an armored truck assault in broad daylight, is filled with car crashes, flips, and explosions, none of which look terribly convincing, and is, in truth, saved only by how much fun it is from start to finish. Whee! I wish I could say Deadpool 2 is as funny as the first, but comedy is subjective, so your individual mileage where the laughs are concerned may vary. The jokes and references are both fast and frenetic, but they rarely hit their mark, and more of them than I care to admit skew toward the juvenile. I'm just not certain this particular style of self-aware metatextual humor is as sustainable as Reynolds and the filmmakers believe. In fact, there is so much winking to the audience, so much nudging, so much, huh, yeah, how about that, did you see that, did you get that, that after a while the entire thing just leaves you tired.
Grin, grin, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more.
It worked well enough the first time around, but here I couldn't help but be reminded of how the old Disney formula that carried them successfully from The Little Mermaid all the way through to The Lion King began to fail noticeably with The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Pour the wine and cut the cheese.
See? My point is, if the Deadpool franchise is going to survive, the philosophy behind its humor is going to require an upgrade, if not an outright overhaul, because I fear it cannot prevail in its current state a third time. I don't fault them for using a formula that's been proven to work, a formula that's gotten them this far with nary a scratch, but I'm not convinced it will yield the same returns next time. What's needed now is a more clever comedic approach, one akin to, say, Arrested Development. Deadpool 2 puts David Leitch in the director's chair this time. He aided in bringing the pulse-pounding, well-executed John Wick to the screen, and his stylish sophomore effort Atomic Blonde delivered thrills, sights, and a soundtrack to die for. He has proven himself capable of helming a production of this scope, making it all the more frustrating when you look at the action sequences on display here, which, for as big as some of them are, fall far short of the meticulous and imaginative staging and choreography that all but made the aforementioned films must-owns for any die-hard action fan. Perhaps the most unforgivable choice made here was the conscious decision to kill off Vanessa, Deadpool's love interest, played by the ever-underused Morena Baccarin. If you happen to catch our review of the new Bruce Willis-led Death Wish remake, you already know we here at Tangent 1985 are vocal in our distaste for the storytelling device known as fridging, wherein female characters are harmed or killed in a shallow measure to propel male protagonists into action, be it physical or emotional. Deadpool blames himself for failing to save Vanessa's life, which becomes the impetus for his desire to protect Fire Fist from Cable. Admittedly, the Deadpool movies have never really known what to do with Vanessa, but having her graduate from damsel in distress to full-on fridge filler was the last straw, an insult atop a still fresh injury.
You broke my heart.
That said, her death does lead to a handful of scenes set in a warm, inviting afterlife where she waits for Deadpool, only for him to learn he cannot yet join her, as his work on Earth remains unfinished, and I was thankful for those at least. There's something that has to be said about the difference between subverting tropes and expectations and merely lampshading them. I openly challenge any claim that the Deadpool films subvert their subject matter. Worse than that, I fear the film often merely plays at being self-aware. It undeniably knows the cliches tied to comics and superhero movies, and bathes in a healthy shower of self-deprecation that makes it difficult for the material to take itself too seriously, yet at no point does it seek to deconstruct or even provide commentary on those same cliches. This entry seems more interested in dragging the other films in its shared universe, Logan in particular, which it regards in terms so harsh it comes off more like jealousy than parody. The James Bond-styled opening title sequence set to a truly cringe-inducing but ultimately unclever Celine Dion track draws attention to the murder of Vanessa in the only way it knows how, which serves to let us know the film is at least aware of the trope while not being particularly concerned with why said trope is so inept or harmful. I will say, however, if there is anything worth the price of admission, it's the mid-credits sequence, which sees Deadpool invading a number of moments both from other Marvel movies as well as the life of actor Ryan Reynolds himself, and these brief scenes are so delightfully haywire, it's difficult not to find yourself wishing the film had just been about this. Deadpool running amok in previous well-known superhero films, both in-universe and out. How much fun could the equivalent of a Deadpool-led Who Framed Roger Rabbit have been? How much side-splitting mayhem could have been wrought in something like that? If nothing else, I think you guys have your premise for Deadpool 3, and for that, you're welcome. I'm giving Deadpool 2 3.25 stars. That's it for today's episode. As always, thank you for joining me. If you enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and follow us on Twitter for more updates. Until next time, you were just in like Glenn.